Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video guys, I'm going to show you how you can go city hopping in Europe or country hopping, whatever you want to do. But this is going to be a step-by-step guide to plan that trip out for you. So make sure you watch until the end of the video because all of these steps matter. So guys, just to give you a backstory, my first solo trip to Europe was me city hopping. I went to England, France, Germany, Belgium. I might be missing somewhere, but it was a 3.5-week trip and I did it all by myself and it was super fun. There's just something about the combination of solo traveling and like country hopping and just being on the go. It's really exciting. And then I decided to take my sister along on my next trip. We did like a little sister's vacation and we did a few countries in Europe. And the following year I took my nieces. We went to Poland, Italy, and somewhere else. Guys, my memory is off today. And then the next trip we took, city hopping, well, country hopping in Europe, was, you guys know, I took my nieces to France, Croatia, and Ireland. So guys, as you can see, it's super duper fun. If fun is the word, it's exciting. So if there's anything in you that wants to do this, that wants to city hop in Europe, this video is for you. So let's jump right in. But before I begin, make sure you download my ultimate checklist. It's in the description below. It'll help you plan your trip to Europe and pretty much anywhere in the world. It's a checklist I came up with after 10 years of traveling the world, things you need to do to have a smooth trip, not have a headache, all that jazz. Be sure to download it. It's absolutely free. Okay guys, before we get into the good stuff, booking our plane ticket, our accommodation, deciding where to go, you need to set up a foundation for your trip. There's a few questions you need to answer before, again, like I said, you book anything. So the first thing you need to decide is how long is your trip gonna be? This will be based on a number of things. Number one being how much time you can get off from work, how much money you have, and how much time you actually feel like staying out the country, how much time you feel like traveling. Like I said, I went traveling alone for 3.5 weeks. Me and my sister and my nieces, we were traveling for 3 months last summer. So this is all up to you. But I recommend, if it's your first time out the country or your first time to Europe, book a trip for about 10 days. Not too short, not too long. I feel like 10 days is just enough time for you to really see a lot and do a lot. The next thing is you need to decide when you want to go. And of course, this has to do with when your job gives you time off. But if you have an open schedule, you guys, I recommend this all the time, but you should definitely travel off season. I recommend sometime during the fall or sometime during the spring and sometime during winter too. But my favorite time to travel in Europe is definitely early fall. So early September, I find that accommodations and plane ticket is super cheap. So just look into that. The next thing, guys, you have to decide where you want to go. I'm absolutely sure you have some kind of idea where you want to go, whether you know for sure you want to go to France and then maybe some other cities and countries around there, or you want to go to Italy and maybe some cities and countries around there. I'm sure you have some kind of idea, but all I want to let you know, wherever you decide to go, try to stay in that part of Europe. It gets expensive when you're trying to jump from one end to the other end of Europe, like what me and my sister did. We went from Croatia to France to Ireland. That wasn't a good idea, but I don't regret it because it was super fun. And I said it wasn't a good idea because we had to pay a lot of money to get to those countries because we had to fly. Have like one country you really want to go to, let's say France, and then you can just see other countries or cities around there. Maybe you want to stay in France and explore France, go city hopping in France. Or maybe you want to go to Spain and Portugal. Those are pretty close. And then for sure, the transportation to those cities won't be super expensive. And in a second, we're going to go more in depth about transportation. But just keep this in mind when you're deciding where to go in Europe, try to stay in the same location. So I made a video all about the place I recommend you go to when you're first starting to travel and when you're first starting on your travel journey, which is Western Europe. You can check that video above and below. So like I said, I do recommend that you go to Western Europe first because it is well traveled and there's just so much information for tourists. But of course, there's so many amazing places to see in Europe, so many amazing things to do. So have fun with this, but just keep this in mind. If you're going further distance, you will have to spend a little bit more on transportation. The last thing you have to think about is all like the legal stuff, the paperwork, the documentation. Just make sure that you are able to easily and effortlessly get into the country you're going to. The main thing here is, of course, the vaccine requirements, the COVID test requirements, all that jazz. So just make sure that whatever your status is, whether you're vaccinated, not vaccinated, just make sure it's easy for you to get in and out the country. And depending on what country you're coming from, you might just need a tourist visa. And guys, in that checklist, I talk all about the things you would need to do to make sure you can get in and out the country easily. So make sure you download that. All right, now that we have all that important stuff out of the way, you know where you're going, you know when you're going, you know how long you're going. That's like the most important part of this trip planning. Now let's talk about how you're going to easily get to each of those cities or countries. That's the main part here. That's the main thing you have to figure out. Okay guys, let's quickly talk about your international flight to Europe and going back to America. So you can choose to actually book a round trip flight to one city. So for example, you can choose to get a round trip flight to Paris, and you can fly into Paris, you can visit the different cities, and you can go back to Paris and leave from there back to America. Or you can book a flight to your starting city and book a flight going back to America to your ending city. This all depends on how much it costs, and then of course how much time you have to travel. So for me, when I took my trip backpacking the first time, and when I took it with my sister the second time, I chose to fly into France and depart from France. So we did France, we did Amsterdam, Germany, and then we took the bus from Germany back to Paris. And we chose to do this because it was super duper cheap. I think it was probably maybe 10-15 bucks to go from Germany to Paris to get back our flight. And it was just too expensive booking a one-way to Paris and then a one-way back to the US from Germany. So it's all up to you what you want to do based on your budget. But I find that it's usually cheaper to book a round trip flight. For some reason, one ways sometimes are expensive. So the three modes of transportation you can take is, of course, the first one is flying. It depends, of course, on how far you're going. If you're trying to go to a city an hour away, there probably won't be any flights available. But of course, if you're going to a city that's like 6-7 hours away drive, there'll probably be flights available. And you can use the super inexpensive airlines in Europe. There's a ton of them. Off the top of my head, there's Ryanair, there's Jetstar, but you don't actually have to know them. You can just go to skyscanner.com, search your flight as you would normally do, and these airlines would pop up in the search. But the thing about using these inexpensive airlines is that literally the only thing you pay for is a seat on the plane. You can't choose where you're sitting. You have absolutely no luggage. You have to pay for your luggage. And of course, meals and all that extra jazz is not included. Yes, you do have a personal bag, but it's a tiny personal bag. So just keep that in mind if you decide to fly from city to city in Europe. You're just gonna have to pay for everything. The next thing you can do is, of course, take the train from city to city in Europe. This is my least way of traveling around Europe because I feel like it's really expensive. Well, it depends on the route you're taking, but usually it's expensive. It takes longer. I might as well just book a flight for like $25 literally instead of booking a train ticket for $60-70. That's going to take me hours and hours. But train travel in Europe is definitely an experience, kind of like train travel in Japan. It's an experience. It's something you should definitely try to experience. But if you're on a tight budget, you can try to use the next method that I'll talk to you about in a second. The easiest way I find train routes to purchase my train tickets is I go to RomeToRio.com. It's a search engine, and it actually shows you many different methods of traveling. So it'll show you flights, train like we're talking about, and the bus routes. So you can actually use this website to help you plan your transportation when country hopping in Europe. Okay guys, so the last way of getting from city to city in Europe is taking the bus, which is the most inexpensive way of traveling around Europe and the least luxurious. Bus travel in Europe is definitely for younger backpackers because it's so cheap. It's not the most comfortable. Sometimes the buses are raggedy. It's a whole thing. But like I said, it's a crazy inexpensive. And actually my favorite way of traveling around Europe, until my business starts making six figures, I'm gonna be taking the bus. And on top of that, my nieces, I travel a lot with them. They love traveling on the bus, so it's a win-win. So my favorite bus company to use, and it's like literally all over Europe, is Flexibus or Flexbus. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'll leave that in the description below for you to check it out. But there are so many bus routes all over Europe, like I said, and they're so cheap. You can get a ticket from $10 to like $25. Okay guys, no matter what mode of transportation you have to take, the only job you have country hopping in Europe or city hopping in Europe is that you make sure that you're on top of your departure times. You know what time you're leaving. Like, you create a schedule for yourself. You know when you're leaving. You know when you're arriving. You're on top of your departure times. You don't want to end up missing your transportation, because not only will you have to book another transportation, but that kind of ruins your schedule, because if you're supposed to be in Y location to do all of these things, you have all of these things booked, but you're still in X, that's gonna cost you money, and that's just gonna waste your time. So literally you need to have it written down, the time your bus is leaving, the time it's arriving, the time you have to check into your Airbnb or hostel or hotel or whatever. You don't want to ruin your trip because you made a mistake. You thought your train was leaving at this time when it's really leaving at another time. So guys, this is not the booking stage right now. You're just doing two things. You're making sure that there are routes available for you from CDA to CDB. And then you're also seeing the costs, because you also have to make sure that everything is in your budget. So again, you're not booking anything right now. You're just seeing what is available for you. All right, guys, so let's move on to step 3. Now that you have outline of your trip, how long you're gonna stay in each location, the days you're gonna be traveling, you have like the bones of your trip. Now it's time to fill in those days of the things that you're planning on doing. So I know I talk about this a lot, but I am a firm believer that you need to plan out your trips. You need to know exactly what you're gonna be doing every day. And if you can, you need to book those things ahead of time. I just like being organized like that. And to tell you the truth, it gets me excited. And it kind of it's just like less stress knowing what I'm doing every day. So I highly recommend that you plan it out. Book things in advance that you can book in advance, like whatever tours you have, even museum tickets. Sometimes those things are actually cheaper online, so just look into that. But the one thing you have to do is make sure that you account for your travel times. So for me, on a travel day, I try not to plan anything. So for example, if I know that on Wednesday I'm traveling to Amsterdam, I'm taking the bus to Amsterdam, all I would plan for that day maybe is I would find a nice restaurant to go to, because travel days can be tiring and it takes a lot of time. Like for example, finding the bus stop, going to the bus stop, and actually it starts back at the Airbnb, packing up my things. And especially when I was traveling with my nieces, making sure everybody's all packed, making sure I have all my documents. And on top of that, making sure I have all my documents nearby and everything is organized. We have snacks, all that jazz. So travel days can take a lot of time. So I would just suggest you account for that. When I was solo traveling, this was easier for me to pick up and go to another city. It didn't take long. So I'm pretty sure when I was solo traveling, I probably did do things on travel days, but you can do whatever works for you. I just want to bring that to your attention. Make time and space for your travel days. Okay guys, so step number 4, the next thing you have to do is now to book everything. Now that you have a clear picture of what your trip is going to look like, what you're gonna do, now it's time to book it. And of course, make sure everything looks good to you before you book it, the cost, all that jazz. So just to let you know, some of the things you would have to book would be your flight, travel insurance, accommodation, and of course, sign up for the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. Again, guys, all of that is listed on that checklist. This is the third time I'm saying it, but I really want you guys to download it because it'll not only help you book this trip stress-free, but also all your additional trips. Okay, guys, step 5 is preparing for your trip. The number one thing, unfortunately, you have to think about is the COVID requirements. And I made a video all about traveling to Europe during COVID. I'll list that above and below to help you go about with all these requirements and annoyingness. But other than that, you need to make sure you have all your documents right. Your passport has 6 months on it. You have your travel insurance, and you have like either a hard copy of your travel insurance or a digital copy. Just make sure it's available. You packed really smart for your trip. You packed all the things you need for yourself and any like needs for the country. Like say for example, you're visiting a lot of holy sites, then you would have to bring something to cover your hair or your arms if you're a woman. I made a video all about the 18 things you need to pack. I'll list that above and below. Those are the things I highly recommend you pack, and make sure you check that out. And other than that, make sure you have all your money saved. Make sure you can use your debit and credit cards in the country you're going to. Guys, what you're doing now is making sure you have everything ready to international travel. So guys, make sure you check out this video here on booking a trip for $1,000. If you're a new budget traveler and you want to know exactly how I go about booking my trips for $1,000, make sure you like this video and subscribe if you haven't. I love talking about travel. I love helping you guys travel internationally and on a budget and just totally enjoy yourself. I'll see you guys in the next video.